Hello, today with us we have Oren Hershkowitz, CEO of Enlivex Therapeutics, trading on the NASDAQ under the ticker ENLV. Oren, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Very happy to be here.
We're happy to have you. To start, Oren, could you give our audience a broad overview of Enlivex Therapeutics, focusing on your core technology and mission? Specifically, how does Allocetra, your universal off-the-shelf cell therapy, work to reprogram macrophages and address immune system imbalances?
Okay, so Enlivex is a cell therapy. It's what we call the next generation cell therapy company, right? It's the next generation because we're focusing on a new modality, as you mentioned, and that's the macrophages. Very, very important key regulator cell that we know how to reprogram. I'll explain in a second. But it's also developing off-the-shelf cell therapy, so very scalable and very cost-effective. So in that sense, what we're doing at Enlivex is using cells in order to target immune cells of the patients called macrophages. Macrophages are a key regulator of the immune cells. They're playing a role in housekeeping, but also in defense against pathogens and so on. However, in some conditions, they go out of control, okay? And they become part of the disease, part of the problem. And that's a very complicated situation to resolve. However, using Allocetra, using our platform, we know how to reprogram those macrophages back into homeostatic state. So we bring them back into controlled state, and they, as a consequence, they bring back the immune system back to balanced state.
Sounds fascinating, Oren. You're targeting some significant unmet medical needs with this macrophage reprogramming approach, which you just discussed. Can you discuss further the size of the market opportunities for your leading pipeline candidates, especially in the areas of sepsis and osteoarthritis? And how does the prevalence and impact of these conditions underscore the potential demand for Allocetra?
Right. So, this is a platform. Allocetra is really a platform. We can apply it in different conditions where macrophages are involved, right? So at the one hand, we have the sepsis. Sepsis is a huge, life-threatening, unmet medical condition where people are getting an infection from viruses or bacteria or whatever, but eventually it develops to a dysregulated immune response. So the immune trying to eliminate the pathogen goes out of control, macrophages goes out of control, there's a huge mess, and eventually that leads to non-specific organ damage, morbidity, mortality. So sepsis, really a huge unmet medical condition, is the third leading cause of mortality in hospitals in the US, right? We're talking about more than $30 billion market. And that's on the one hand. And the other one is actually this chronic, life debilitating condition, which is osteoarthritis. It's a joint, low-grade inflammation that leads to eventually a lot of pain and disability, loss of function, and at the end of that, usually a knee replacement therapy, knee replacement surgery. So that's, again, there's really poor treatments today. And we understand now that macrophages are emerging target in osteoarthritis. And this is exactly where Allocetra fits in perfectly. It's about a $9 to $10 billion market. Again, a very, very large market. In this case, we're injecting Allocetra directly into the joint, whereas in sepsis, it's a systemic exposure. So you have very different indications, very different conditions using this platform.
Oren, could you elaborate on Enlivex's current clinical pipeline? You have a phase 2b trial for sepsis and a phase 1/2 trial in osteoarthritis. What are the primary endpoints of these trials, and what upcoming milestones can investors look forward to over the next 12 to 18 months?
Sure. So let's start with sepsis. First of all, we've completed already a phase 1b study. We treated 10 septic patients, moderate septic patients. We gave them Allocetra on top of standard of care, and all of those 10 patients recovered swiftly and discharged from the hospital with no residual disease. We've compared that to a historical control group where we had 27% mortality. So small study, but very, very promising data. Following which, we've opened a randomized, controlled, blinded, multi-center, multi-country study, and we've announced the completion of the recruitment for that study end of last year. So we've completed recruitment of 120 severe moderate to severe septic patient. This is the target population that we're projecting eventually that will receive Allocetra, assuming we get an approval at the end of this process. And endpoints of this study, we're talking about scoring of organ dysfunction. We're talking about 28 days all-cause mortality, vasopressor-free days, classical sepsis, efficacy endpoint, and obviously safety as well. This is within the sepsis study. Now, the phase 1/2 study in osteoarthritis, we actually have 2 studies. The first one is an investigator-initiated trial study. It's ongoing already. We announced the dosing of the first patient. This is for patients that are already indicated for knee replacement surgery. So we give them Allocetra in lieu of that surgery, and we follow their pain and their willingness to go through the surgery, you know. So this is an open label, it's ongoing, and we'll probably have data. It's about 12 patients in that study, maybe even a little bit more. We'll probably have data Q3, end of Q3 this year. But the bigger study is the company-sponsored study that we initiated just now. We've announced the first regulatory approval for that study. It's actually a phase 1/2 study, but the phase 1 is like a safety run-in, and the phase 2 part of it is a randomized, controlled, statistically powered study to show differences in pain between Allocetra treated group and controlled group. So again, we're talking about knee osteoarthritis patient. In this case, we're talking about kind of a moderate to severe patients, which is the largest segment of those patients. And we're giving them several injections of Allocetra or placebo, and we're following their pain for 3 months, 6 months, and even up to 12 months. And the top line data from that study will be Q3 25. So if I'm summarizing all of those clinical endpoints, just to to help everybody to kind of consolidate all of this. So we have the sepsis data, the top line data from the phase 2. We're expecting to get that data first, second week of April. So just around the corner, okay? The second one from the osteoarthritis in the second year of 24, and this year, we'll have some data from the open label studies that I've described. And in 25, Q3, we'll have the top line data from the phase 2 randomized controlled study. So we're talking about several potential inflection points. And we are well funded to cover all of those activities, actually all the way to 25.
Good to know, Oren. And you've been talking about this relatively short regulatory approval pathway, particularly in Europe, which could enable post-phase 2 marketing approval in sepsis. Can you explain this specialized regulation and how it positions Enlivex for potentially accelerated market access compared to traditional pathways?
Sure. So, for life-threatening unmet medical condition, there should be, and there is, an accelerated pathway because we want to bring life-saving drugs to patients as fast as possible, right? So basically, you need to check the box about an unmet medical condition, which sepsis is. It's a life-threatening condition, which is definitely the case. And you need to show really good data to get this accelerated approval. So, as a caveat, this is subjective to the results. But assuming that, and hopefully if we get very positive data, this regulatory pathway allows you to get a conditional approval where you can actually start commercializing the drug, but in parallel to do kind of a confirmatory phase 3 study. So it's definitely an accelerated approval. It's a very important regulatory pathway. We'll see the data, and we're hopeful that it will allow us to pursue that specific pathway.
Enlivex boasts strong leadership and notable partnerships, Oren, including a significant agreement with Pfizer. How do these partnerships and your leadership's team experience, especially with that successful exit from Prolor Biotech, position Enlivex for success in the highly competitive biotech landscape?
Right. So I think Enlivex has a very, very experienced management team. It's not just experience per individual, but actually we've collaborated, myself and the executive chairman of Enlivex, Mr. Shai Novik. We've collaborated, as you mentioned, in the previous company in Prolor, which became later on Opco Biologics. So let me pause a little bit and just tell the story quickly there. So Prolor was a garage-based biotech company that was founded in 2005 by Mr. Shai Novik, and it developed long-acting therapeutic drugs. So we've licensed this life-extending technologies and developed long-acting therapeutic drugs for hemophilia, for growth hormone disorders, for obesity and diabetes, and so on. In 2013, the company was acquired by a Miami-based pharmaceutical company, Opco Health, Phil Frost, and then that was about a $500 million acquisition deal. Shai stayed like 2 years later, and together we actually did an additional deal with over the leading asset with Pfizer. It was a co-development and licensing agreement with Pfizer over the leading asset, a long-acting growth hormone. I've managed Opco Biologics and worked with Pfizer to do the late-stage development and got this drug all the way to submission. It's actually today approved, and I'm very proud to say that that drug is approved in 43 countries. It's called NGENLA. It's a once-weekly growth hormone for growth hormone deficiency in pediatric population. So there's really, in 2019, I left Opco Biologics and rejoined Shai, and we've been leading Enlivex ever since. So there is really a lot of experience from the development side, taking drugs from preclinical all the way to approval, but also from the business side. I would also mention Mr. Roger Pomerantz, who joined our board last year. He was the he led the acquisition at Merck and was a venture partner at Flagship. So, you know, a very strong person with a lot of experience in the biotech world, and he's helping us to continue and move Enlivex forward.
Finally, for our investor audience, could you give us the essential value proposition behind Enlivex Therapeutics? Why should investors take an interest in your company right now?
Well, I think we've kind of talked about it throughout this interview, but I'll try to summarize. So first of all, I think that, you know, technology. It's a very novel modality of reprogramming macrophage. I think Enlivex is the only company that knows how to do that. Second, it's not just a cell therapy, but it's a next generation cell therapy, an off-the-shelf drug, very cost effective, so scalable, can be commercialized quite easily, and so on. That's the second thing. The third thing is that we have a very diverse pipeline. Unmet medical conditions, whether it's life-threatening or life-debilitating conditions, huge markets where there is really a need for a novel approach, and this is what we do. On top of that, we're talking about a very experienced management, and that's obviously important. And I think also we didn't talk about this too much, but Enlivex has a very plain vanilla capital structure, no debt, $30 million. It could take us all the way to the end of 25, several inflection points in different indications. And I think if you sum all of this up, it's really a very good value proposition.
That is a very interesting story, Oren. Thank you for sharing it with us today.
Thank you very much for having me. It was great talking to you.